Hey guys, this is Paul, and today, or rather yesterday, since it's past midnight as I'm filming this, I beat the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney trilogy on the Nintendo 3DS eShop. Not to be confused with the three individual releases for DS and WiiWare. Like, this one trilogy had the first three Ace Attorney games all spruced up with high resolution. But one thing that I think most Ace Attorney fans are trying their best to forget about, especially after Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright came out, still my favorite game ever, by the way, and that's Apollo Justice, which was the fourth game in the Ace Attorney series, and I was actually just reading over an article by Shu Takumi, however you pronounce it, who is the creator of Ace Attorney, and his intent was for the game to be a trilogy, and then that would be Phoenix's last appearance. He wanted to finish up Phoenix's story and not have, quote, the series be a shadow of itself. The problem is that, like with most video game companies, demand. The team was absolutely desperate that they wanted to make a fourth Ace Attorney, probably because the game did such a smashing success in North America, and they probably said, well, money and whatnot. But Takumi was pretty insistent. He was like, okay, well, if you're going to make a fourth Ace Attorney, you can't have Phoenix be the main character. His story's been told. Move on. But they still didn't listen to him, and they said, well, what if we just make it where Phoenix isn't the main character, but he's still in it anyway? And that was the crucial problem to why, for the first time in my review series, I'm giving a negative score to the game I'm about to review. Now, that's not to say this game is entirely bad, because from a gameplay perspective, it does a really good job. If you've played the previous Ace Attorney games, not much has changed here. It's the same, read through, more text than most people know how to allow in a video game. And then as you're listening to witnesses testify in the courtroom, you look through the court record and you sort out which piece of evidence contradicts their testimony. And then you'll be asked, okay, will you prove your point further? And then you'll get a set of questions to work through there. And if you've played the other three Ace Attorney games, none of what I said should surprise you. What should surprise you, though, is the new perceiving system. You know how Phoenix had his Magatama? Well, Apollo has this bracelet that allows him to really, really zoom in on a witness testifying and then point out a nervous habit they have and then present an evidence as to show why they're getting nervous. It's actually a pretty cool gameplay mechanic, and I don't think the Game Boy Advance games that came before it could have kept up with the impressive technology. Also, during investigations, now that the psych locks have been removed, I definitely felt a much more free-flowing sense of progress, even though I got stuck a few times, which I think is always going to be a perpetual complaint of mine in Ace Attorney. Although Dual Destinies did a good job of replacing it. Anyway, without the psych locks, I found myself not getting as frustrated as before. And I even actually had fun, because Emma Skye, that science-obsessed teenager from Rise from the Ashes, is the lead detective in that game. And even though she's a lot grumpier than she was in the first Ace Attorney, she gives a much-needed scientific perspective. So you do stuff like you fill in a footprint mold with plaster, and then you dry it off to make a foot comparison. Or you sprinkle fingerprint powder and then blow into the DS's microphone to scan someone's fingerprints, or even roll out the contents of a letter. This stuff is really cool, makes good use of the DS's touchscreen and microphones, and this may be just me, but I also really liked the sound effects that are much more new agey and a lot better than the Game Boy Advance chiptune sound effects in the old Ace Attorneys, though there's still plenty of that preserved here for continuity's sake. Now, with all these good things about the game, you're probably wondering why I gave it such a thumbs down at the beginning of this video. And that's because with Ace Attorney, the primary focus has always been on the storyline and the characters. And that is where Apollo Justice is not only bad, but I would even go so far as to say it's a disgrace. Literally, this game should never have happened. And I appreciate Versus for that, because basically, with Maya being back and Phoenix back to its old self, it's clear that Capcom was probably thinking fans liked it best when Phoenix was in his prime after Trials and Tribulations. But the Phoenix we get here it's almost as though he's a completely different person that just happens to be named Phoenix Wright. You know, he's very calm and collected, often, sometimes even a bit of a jerk, and he seems like he's got everything under control, and as it turns out, he's secretly working behind the scenes on this elaborate project, which I won't spoil in case you are determined to play this game anyway. But suffice to say, Phoenix has a plan, and he's been going through it for a long time. It basically defeats the essence of Phoenix's character, because Phoenix was always the type of lawyer that often went into a case mostly unprepared. And he also had an unreasonable amount of trust in his clients. From the bottom of his heart, he always believed that his clients were innocent, and he'd do whatever it took to prove it. But the way that he proved it gave him the nickname of the turnabout lawyer in some circles, because he had a way of taking an impossible case, flipping his thinking around, and then coming to a decision from there that completely shocks everyone. But in this game, Phoenix already has everything figured out. He never stutters, he doesn't break into a cold sweat. He's just like, oh, I know the answer to this. Let's see if you can figure it out, Apollo. And if I had to compare it to anything, it would basically be like, it's almost as though Professor Layton is in this game. And that probably wouldn't have been a problem. But the fact that it's Phoenix is just what gets under my skin so much. And you may be thinking, okay, Paul, you're panicking over nothing. I mean, Phoenix could have evolved during that time, right? I mean, is that so terrible? And maybe it's the part of me that likes continuity, but the game also does a poor job of handling it, even if you came into this without prior knowledge of what Phoenix used to be. Because the characters simply don't match up to the charm of the old crowd, like Gumshoe and Larry, and even Franziska von Karma with her annoying whipping was better than this. I mean, don't get me wrong, the writing is still fantastic, and there's still plenty of laughs to be had in this game, but overall, the plot twists just don't seem as satisfying, and even worse so, they're often executed so poorly that you feel a sense of letdown after every case. I won't spoil it, but suffice to say that oftentimes the game's resolutions aren't exactly clear. Like, to this day, I've played through the game maybe 2 or 3 times, and I still don't entirely know why the mastermind of the game did what he did. It still doesn't make too much sense to me. And the way that you solve the final case isn't even with a piece of evidence. It's an utterly broken mess of a game that shouldn't have existed in the first place. Now, granted, there are a couple of other bright spots even without a story and gameplay perspective. The graphics are definitely nice for a DS title, and I do like how a lot of the familiar locations like the waiting lobby, the courtroom, and the detention center have a nice, better face coat, and most of the music is really good, and the new theme song for the prosecutor is quite catchy. But overall, the game just... it's as though Capcom was trying too hard to create a new direction for the Ace Attorney series. And I don't know if I've mentioned this in a previous video, but for me, my favorite types of games are the ones that don't necessarily try to reinvent a franchise, but they take what worked and improved it, and took what didn't work and took it out. And in this game's case, I can't really say they did all that great of a job with that. And so, with that being said, my final verdict, no pun intended, for this game is probably a 7 out of 10. And the only reason I'm being a bit generous, because I'd probably give it a 6 if it were the story alone. I'm being a bit generous because the gameplay does work really well. You definitely won't be complaining about, like, the input being frustrating, or the game not being clear enough on how to play, even if they're occasionally unclear on what you have to do. Also, there is this really cool flashback case where it explains how Phoenix Wright got to fall from grace, and you very clearly see the contrast here. You see Phoenix back in his prime, back to the way you remembered him, and after the events of that, Phoenix just pulls a complete 360 in his personality. And if only the entire game had been like that one little flashback, then maybe I would have liked it. But as it stands, it's only a small portion of a fairly long game, so yet another missed opportunity. But I definitely wouldn't let this game discourage you from continuing the Ace Attorney series, because the next game, Dual Destinies, definitely did a good job of at least attempting to bring the Ace Attorney series back to its prime, even if I still prefer the old titles. And Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright just blew me out of the water, so try Ace Attorney, just don't try this game. Anyway, thanks for listening, and stay tuned for a Catholic review somewhere along the way, because I'm really looking forward to showing you guys how to see these video game stories from a new light. And as I say in all my videos, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.